Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. My name is Kyle from Kyle Foreman Photography, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about time blending, or to borrow a phrase from one of my personal favorite photographers, Elia Lacardi, moments in time. And so today I want to just kind of show you the steps that I went through to create this image here. And my goal with this image was to basically have the sunset colors fading in to a blue hour fading in to the night sky. And so let's get started. So as you can see, we're in Lightroom. Um, you can use whatever raw image processing program that you like. It doesn't have to be Lightroom. Um, but basically, what I did first was narrow down the images that I took of the lighthouse. And as you can see here, the last image I took at 7:17. The first image I took at, let's see, 5:56. So I basically did this over the course of a little over an hour. All right. So one of the things I wanted with this image was the light beam going all the way around the lighthouse, as you can see here. So the first thing we're going to do is get our photos together for that light beam. And I'm doing it this way because I found out just through trial and error that the blending of the two different skies, if you will, kind of made it difficult to get the lights back in if I did it last. So we're going to do it first. And so all these images here that you can see, the little square means I've done some basic adjustments to them. These are going to be the ones that I'm going to use for my light beam. And um, all I did was just some very basic adjustments. I don't think I left the basic panel at all. If you're here watching a video on time blending, I'm going to assume you already know the basics of Lightroom and editing raw images, so I'm not going to get into that. But if that is something you'd like to know more of, leave me a comment down below. All right, so first off, we're going to bring this into Photoshop. All right, copy this. Now let's go back into Lightroom and grab another one. And we'll do the same thing. Edit in Photoshop. All right, and then I'm going to press Control A for select all, Control C for copy, Control W to close the window after I exit out. I'm going to paste it into here. And first, the camera didn't move, so it should be aligned. Let's just make sure. And the toggle on and off, the lighthouse doesn't seem to move, so they should be aligned. So now with this top layer, I'm just going to change the blend mode to lighten. And the light beam is still not quite coming all the way through. Let's lower the opacity of this bottom layer and see what happens. Let's turn this one off. There we go. All right, now that light beam is starting to come through a little bit. And basically, I'm just going to repeat this process until I get the light beam exactly how I want it. Okay, so this is good enough for now. Um, and again, these are basically gonna just all be for my light beam here. And what I'm gonna do is just put all of these in a folder and name it lights. All right, so now we're gonna go and find a more blue hour um, type photo to blend in with our lights. And I think this one looks pretty good. Let's see what else we have. Let's use, let's see. That one's a little bright. Let's use one of these I already selected. Let's use this one. So you can see there are some stars coming through, but there's still a little bit of glow here. And this one I haven't done any raw adjustments. Let's do some real quick. And I'll just do what I normally do to most of my photos. Pull down the highlights a little bit, bump up the shadows. I won't do much with the whites on this. Bump up the blacks just a touch and add some dehaze. Yeah, maybe a little less, something around there. Then we'll add a little bit of global contrast, maybe not too much there. And really, that's probably about it with all we're going to do. The lens corrections, I'm only going to do remove chromatic aberrations because for whatever reason, sometimes when you enable profile corrections, it causes alignment issues in Photoshop. I'm not exactly sure why. If anyone out there does know why, feel free to let me know in the comments. All right, so again, we're gonna select it, copy it, close it. The one thing I want to do first here is create a new layer out of our lights. And now let's paste our blue hour photo in. All right, and I think I want to place the lights photo on top. And then we're just going to add a mask. I'm going to come to the gradient tool. I'll move this out of my way. Zoom out real quick so I can see it better. And then with the gradient tool, we're just going to draw a gradient up and blend in this blue hour sky into just until, until wherever you want, wherever you think it looks good. I think something about here looks pretty good. Somewhere in there. Let's just play around with this. And this is all trial by error. I just kind of go with what I think looks good. There is no uh, perfect way to do this. It's just um, whatever looks good to you. All right, I think something right around there. And I try to have a smooth transition. So you don't want, like, if you move this thing up too far, you're going to have a line here, a visible line. You don't want that. So you're just looking for something that's kind of a smooth transition from this bluish hour into our night sky image. And I think something around there looks pretty good. All right, so next step is we're going to get one closer to sunset, and I had a couple photos that had some nice golden light shining on this lighthouse. So now we're going to incorporate that photo into what we already have here. So let's go back into Lightroom. And let's use the one I already have selected here. Let's just look around and see if there's anything else that we may want to use. Let's just stick with this one. All right, so we're going to edit in Photoshop. Control ACW, paste it in. And we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to put this layer on top because I want it to be on top. Actually, this time I might have to go. Let's leave it on the bottom and see what happens with the gradient. And this time we'll go from the top to bottom. Well, I guess I got to put a mask on there first. And again, I'm just going for something that looks kind of like a smooth transition to just get that glow from the sunset in there. I don't know what that was about. Let's just undo it and start over. And somewhere in there, I think looks pretty good. Maybe pull this back up, just mess around with this a little bit. And I think something around there looks pretty good. All right, another thing I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna zoom in to the lighthouse and zoom out a little bit. I'm gonna take a brush and paint in that golden light on the lighthouse. And I gotta be a little careful here so it doesn't spill onto the edge, giving me some nasty looking halo things. So let's just be, and I'm gonna actually lower my flow here to something pretty low, something like that. And just kind of easily and carefully paint in that golden light that we had shining on the lighthouse. I think it looks really nice and adds a nice touch. And one thing I forgot to say about our light layer is the inside of our lighthouse here is getting a little blown out, but don't worry about that. We will fix that later. All right, so now let's just see what we've done. Let's turn our mask on and off. And yeah, I think that is starting to look pretty nice. Okay, and one thing I haven't mentioned yet either is I'm sure I do have some sensor dust and stuff like that around here. I haven't cleaned it up yet because I plan on cropping this photo down quite a bit. Um, I was shooting really wide because I was hoping to get one of those really nice sunsets that this area is known for, but it didn't quite happen, which is what also made me decide to do this time blend. Sorry. All right. So now we've got our blend, and I'm going to take everything here, put it in another folder, and just call this blend. I just like to stay organized. All right, so now we're going to create a new layer out of all of those. And a quick way to do that is just Control Shift Alt E, and it'll give you a new layer out of everything. And now I'm just going to go into our camera raw filter, and I'm just going to do some things just to try to make this glow, this sunset color, the little bit of color I did get, slash some color from golden hour. I'm just going to try to make it come out a little bit more. And I'm just going to do the same thing I did in Lightroom. I'm just going to pull down the highlights a little bit. And again, this is all just trial and error. I like to just kind of go back and forth with the sliders until I see whatever looks good. And we're just going to boost our shadows a little bit. The whites, I don't think I'm going to do too much with that. Maybe pull them down just a touch. And then boost the blacks just a touch as well. And then I always like to add some dehaze to my photos. It gives it a nice little boost. I don't know exactly what it does, but I think it looks nice. And then we'll add a little bit of contrast, a little bit of global contrast, not too much. All right, and now I want to do some masking. So let's go into our mask, and I really want to select this color here and just see if I can bring it out some more. So I'm going to do a change feature if my computer decides to cooperate. And I'm going to do a color range. And I'm just going to select this color here. And then what I'm going to do is I only want it to be in this part of the sky. So I'm going to subtract with a brush all the other parts that the color range selected. So all this stuff in red is what it selected. And I'm just going to delete all of it except for the sky. I'm even going to zoom in here and subtract it from the lighthouse. What has happened? Why did I go into this? Go back to my mask. Brush. There we go. And I'm going to subtract the selection off of the lighthouse just because I think that light on the lighthouse is already pretty distinct by itself, and I don't want to overdo it with what I'm going to do to the sky. All right. So let's zoom out and let's just see what happens if we warm this up a little bit. Yeah. And you can see right there we're already getting that nice glow to come out a little bit more. And now let's just see what we do with highlights. I bring them down a little bit. It's not really doing too much. I think for the most part we'll just leave it alone. Maybe even boost it just a little bit. Let's see what contrast does. Contrast gets us some more of that yellow color I'm looking for. Shadows probably won't do much. No, we'll just leave that alone. And we'll boost the whites a little bit there as well. All right. And now the next thing to do is let's go into our color mixer and see what we can do with this color and see if we can get it to stand out just a little bit more. And I think shifting it just a touch to the orange looks really nice like that. The luminance, I don't think I'm going to do too much with the luminance. I think I'm just going to leave that alone. Saturation, maybe give it just a touch of saturation. I know for some people I might be going too far, but I kind of like my saturated colors. Something, nothing too crazy, just something like that I think is good. Now let's go into the oranges and we're just going to kind of do the same thing. Just kind of play with the hue until I see a color that I like. I think something around there. Yeah, something like that I think looks pretty good. And one last thing I want to see if I can do. If it doesn't, if it doesn't work great, it's fine. We can probably do some other things. But I just want to see what I can do with the night part of the sky. So I'm gonna see what select sky gets me. All right. And what I'm gonna do again is subtract with a brush the parts of the sky I don't want selected. And this might not work, but we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. All right, I'm gonna get that overlay out of there. All right, let's see if we lower our exposure just a bit. Yeah, it's giving me. You just want to watch out that you don't get that harsh line like that there. You want it to be smooth. So maybe just a touch of negative exposure, just barely. Let's add some contrast, see if that does anything. Add a little bit of contrast to it. highlights, I want to see if I can get those stars to pop out some more. So I want to see if I can bring out the highlights, which would be the stars. I'm going to do the same thing with the whites and just see if I can get those stars to pop out some more. Let's see if shadows does anything. No, I don't want to mess with the shadows. Let's reset that. And then so let's see what happens if we cool it down just a bit as well. Don't want to go too crazy like that. I think actually adding some warmth to it makes that transition a little bit better. So let's do that then. I think right there adding some warmth is good. And then let's see what dehaze gets us. Yeah, there we go. Something just like that. I think that's starting to look nice. Okay, and so I think we are done with our camera raw filter. Now if you hit the backslash key, you can see our before. So we went from there to there. So I think a pretty big adjustment. And I don't think we did anything too crazy. We tried to keep everything a little subtle. Um, maybe we got a little too much golden light on the lighthouse here, but I think it's okay. We can also bring some of that down um, in here in Photoshop. And one thing I like to do, if you think you maybe went a little too far with your adjustments here, you can always adjust the opacity of the layer. And I, a lot of times, will bring it back down to somewhere around 70 or 75. Because I think, have a tendency to go a little heavy on some colors and some saturation. So though I do think this looks nice, I think bringing it back down to about 75%, somewhere between 70 and 100, I think that looks pretty good. So there's our before camera raw, after camera raw, and let's label our layers so we stay organized and named it ACR for Adobe Camera Raw. And now we're going to create another new layer. And one thing I want to do is just see if what else I can do with this sunset color to maybe just bring it out just a touch more. And for this, I'm going to do some luminosity masking. And to do that, I'm going to go into the channels. And if you control click your RGB, it's going to give you your highlights. And then if we go back into layers, what I want to do is make a folder, add a mask to that folder, which will have our selection of our highlights in it. And we add this layer into the folder, and then I'm going to hit Control M for curves. And this should just affect our highlights. It should not affect anything else. So if we bring it down, you can see it's just bringing down those highlights and nothing else. You can bring it all the way down. You can see everything else in the photo remains intact. It's just affecting those highlights, which is what I want. And I want to bring them just down just a little bit to get that nice orange glow color that fades into our darker night sky. I think something around there looks pretty nice. Let's hit OK. And then another thing I want to do is I basically want to do the same thing again, but with our shadows. So we're going to go in the RGB, control click. This will give us our highlights. This is our highlights selection. And so now I want to invert that. Control Shift I should invert it, do the mask again. And then this one should be our shadows. Alright, so we'll go back in the layers, do the same thing, create a folder, add a mask, which will have our selection, add this layer into it, and then Control M for curves, and this should be our shadow layer. And as you can see, if I bring it up, it's not doing anything to those highlights. It's not bringing them up. It's leaving them right where they were, and it's just boosting the shadows of the photo. And I just want to give it just a little boost. I think it's a little slightly underexposed, somewhere around there. I think that looks pretty good. And let's name these so we remember what they are. All right. I think it's starting to look pretty nice. We're almost done. The last thing I'm going to do, or one of the last things I'm going to do, is create a new layer. And um, I recently got a new uh, editing software. I got it for free as part of buying the Photographing the World series from Elia Licardi and the F Stoppers group, if you're familiar with them. They do not sponsor this. This is my first ever YouTube video. I do not have any sponsors, although if they would like to sponsor me, that would be great. But I've been using Radiant Photo ever since I got it as part of the tutorial series I bought, and I'm really liking it so far, especially as just kind of a finishing tool and sometimes a starting tool. Um, but basically, its AI just does a really good job um, of just correcting colors, correcting exposure, and just making the photo look good, in my opinion. So you can see that's our before, this is our after, and that's just on the auto setting. Before, after, before, after. You can see it brings those midtones up so the photo is a little bit brighter where it should be. It kind of cooled off our sky a little bit, which I like. And the one thing I am going to take off, so let's go into the detailed edit. It automatically applies this sharpening, which I don't want because I like to do my sharpening just at the end when I'm completely done. So I'm going to take that off. And let's just click on auto and see what it does. I think it's already on auto. Let's go into landscape night since this is kind of a night image. You can see it didn't change much. Its auto pretty much did the same thing. So let's just leave it right there. And I think it looks pretty good. And if you do use this, and you think it did too much, you can always bring the enhance down, and that'll just kind of reduce the effect. Same with the color. Um, it's like the color contrast. I used to use Color Effects Pro of the Nick collection a lot, and I still do sometimes, but this has honestly kind of replaced it for me because it literally does basically the exact same thing with one click. I'm gonna just wait for this to load. And always, if you think it went a little too far, you can always reduce the opacity. And I think I'm gonna do that. And I usually do to any of my adjustments that I've not any, but a lot of my adjustments that I make. I usually bring them back down just a little bit, um, just so it's not too crazy. But yeah, I think something like that is pretty nice. And so now let's Control S to save it, and this may take a minute. And then I'm going to do my cropping in Lightroom. Um, for whatever reason, I just like the way the cropping tool works better in Lightroom than Photoshop. I don't know why. The cropping in Photoshop is just annoying to me. So we're going to use Lightroom. First, let's name this Radiant. And actually, before we go back into Lightroom and do our cropping, there's a couple things I forgot that I do want to do. So let's make a new layer and let's go into our brightness and contrast and just see what this does. Yeah. You see our histogram is a little on the left side, so I just want to see if we brighten this up just a touch. Not too much, because then we're gonna make our night sky look unrealistic. Um, I mean, this is a time blend, so there's gonna be, you want it to be as realistic as possible. There's obviously gonna be some things that are not completely realistic, but we want it to look as good as possible. I think something around there with our brightness and contrast. I think that looks pretty good. And then one thing I want to see what happens if I do is I want to go in to this photo filter. I just want to warm up our nice little glow here from the sunset. So I'm going to pull it up, and I'm right now when I'm doing this, when I'm increasing the density, I'm just looking at the yellow part of my sky, the yellow and orange part of my sky to see how it's going to look. Because when I get it to look how I want it to, I'm going to invert this mask. So something around there I think looks good. And I'm going to hit Control I to invert my mask. And then I'm going to use a brush on a low flow. So I'm even bring it down less than 15. Let's go down to like 10. And then I'm going to paint in that warmth where I want it. I'm going to paint it in here to that warm part of the photo. And I think the lighthouse is already pretty warm, so I'm not going to touch it, but just right in here. It's very subtle. You probably might not even be able to tell I did anything. If we turn it off, you can see how we just warmed it up just a touch, and I think it just looks real nice when we do that. All right, and what the last thing we're going to do, and this is still saving from before I added my warmth and brightness and contrast, but the last thing I'm going to do is I do like to run things like this through Topaz, just because the night photos were shot at like 1600 ISO. So, and then all the stuff you do in Adobe, whether it be adding contrast and dehaze and all that type of stuff adds a little bit of noise as well. So we're going to go into Topaz. I'll move it over here so you can see it. And it's going to do our denoise and our sharpening all at once. So you can see that's a pretty big difference from our night sky part. You can see the noise there from shooting at a high ISO for a night shot, and then Topaz takes it right out. I don't have to do anything, just apply. All right, and if we zoom in here, you can see there our Topaz layer is applied. All right, so I'm going to save it one more time. And again, this is going to take a minute because we do have quite a bit of layers here. It's quite a big file, over 2 gigs, I think, right now. It's one of the downsides of doing this type of photography. There we go, finally saved. All right, so now that it's saved, let's go into Lightroom, and now is where I want to do my cropping. And like I said before, I'm going to do quite a bit of cropping. I really want to get rid of basically all of this foreground. Had I known I was going to end up doing this to begin with, I would have shot much closer, but I didn't. And I like the lighthouse to be centered. I like centered compositions. It's just me. And something like that, I think looks pretty good. I'm just checking here if there's any center spots. I probably should have got rid of this trash can. And, if I really wanted to, I could go back into Photoshop and delete it. But all that type of stuff is stuff you can do on your own. Um, I basically just wanted to go through and show you how I would do a time blend, um, and basically have the shot of the lighthouse with the lights going around the lighthouse. And I didn't get very many sunset colors, but what little sunset colors I did, I have them fading into a nice kind of bluish hour and then fading into the night sky with stars. This type of photography might not be for everybody, but I really like it. Um, and I made this video because when I was looking for tutorials or videos myself for tips on how to do this, I couldn't really find much. So I basically used some tips and techniques I already knew and then just kind of implemented them in um, to my own photography. And one thing we did forget to do, I said that we would do, is tone down this part of the lighthouse. It is a little blown out. Um, I'm not gonna waste your time and go back to do that, but I will explain how I would do it. And I would just basically go in to Lightroom, back into Lightroom. I'd find one of my photos that has a properly exposed, um, I don't know what you call this, but where the lens and light of the lighthouse is like this. This is exposed nice, so you can see all the detail of the glass. You would open this in Photoshop. Let's just do it real quick. You would just do the same thing we did for our lights. You open it in Photoshop. I would paste it into this document. I'd add a mask to it. I would invert the mask because the only thing I want is this. So I'm going to take a brush again with a low flow, make my brush quite smaller, make sure I'm painting with white, and just kind of paint back in that detail. You got to be a little color careful around the edges here. You don't paint in that dark sky. Zoom in a little bit further. I don't know why Photoshop does this to me sometimes. I'm going to increase my flow just a little bit. Oops, wrong color. Hit X to change it, if it ever decides to change. There we go. And we're just going to calm down these highlights up here in the lighthouse. Something like that. So that's how you would just bring back, tone down these highlights inside the glass of the lighthouse here. It's just make sure you have a photo that is properly exposed for this part and just paint in that light. All right. And this was our finished product. Again, it's not exactly the same as the first one I did because it's near impossible, I think, to edit a photo exactly the same twice. But it's close enough, and I think you get the gist. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit a thumb. And if not, that's fine too. And if you want to subscribe, that would also be great. All right. Thanks, guys.